Get up now, or we'll have you removed from this aircraft." The voices echo across first class as security guards tower over a black teenager. His crime? Sitting in the seat he paid for. In moments he'll be humiliated, dragged from his rightful place, and forced to the back of the plane while an older white man smirks, settling comfortably into the teen's seat. But what happens when this flight lands will shock everyone on board. Have you ever wondered how quickly the tables can turn when someone abuses their power? How karma sometimes delivers justice in the most unexpected ways? Today's story isn't just about racism in the skies, it's about dignity in the face of disrespect, and what happens when you mess with the wrong family. This isn't fiction. This happened on Flight 2877 last month, and the aftermath sent shockwaves through an entire airline. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button to make sure you never miss these powerful real-life stories of justice served. Now, let me introduce you to Elijah Johnson. At 16, Elijah carried himself with a maturity beyond his years. The son of Dr. Michelle Johnson, one of the country's most successful healthcare technology CEOs, Elijah was flying alone that day to visit potential colleges on the East Coast. His mother had taught him well: stand tall, speak clearly, and never forget your worth. For this important trip, Dr. Johnson had purchased a first-class ticket to give her son space to review application materials during the 3-hour flight. As Elijah boarded the plane that morning, he carried a sleek laptop bag and wore a crisp button-down shirt, looking every bit the young professional. The flight attendant, Sharon Miller, greeted passengers with practiced smiles, but something changed when she saw Elijah approach the first-class cabin. "Excuse me," she said with a tight smile, "economy boarding is later." Elijah politely presented his boarding pass. "I'm in 3A, ma'am." Sharon's smile didn't reach her eyes as she nodded stiffly, watching him take his window seat with obvious discomfort. Her gaze followed him as he settled in, as if expecting him to make a mistake, to confirm whatever assumptions were playing behind her eyes. Meanwhile, Elijah arranged his space efficiently, laptop out, college brochures organized, noise-canceling headphones ready. When the flight attendant offered pre-departure beverages, he politely declined, focusing instead on his college research. As boarding continued, an elderly white businessman named Thomas Palmer hurried onto the plane, clearly frustrated and mumbling about delays. At 68, Thomas carried an air of entitlement that came from decades of being catered to. When he reached the first-class cabin, his irritation was obvious. "I specifically requested an aisle seat near the front," he complained loudly to Sharon. "This won't work for my back condition." Sharon checked his boarding pass and frowned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Palmer, but it seems you've been assigned 7C. Thomas huffed, glancing around first class, his eyes landing on Elijah, now absorbed in his headphones and laptop, unaware of the conversation happening just feet away. "What do you think happened next? Have you ever witnessed someone being discriminated against while others simply watched? Let me know in the comments." Little did Elijah know, his peaceful college research was about to be violently interrupted, setting off a chain of events that would change not just his day, but the policies of an entire airline forever. As Thomas Palmer surveyed the first-class cabin with growing frustration, his eyes lingered on Elijah's window seat. Within moments, he approached Sharon again, this time lowering his voice, but still loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Listen, my back is killing me from standing in that security line. I need a good seat, not something in the back. Surely you can do something?" His tone carried the weight of someone accustomed to getting his way. Sharon glanced at Elijah, then back to Thomas. "Let me see what I can do," she replied with a knowing smile. What happened next demonstrated just how quickly assumptions can overpower facts. Sharon approached Elijah's seat with purpose, standing over him until he noticed her presence and removed his headphones. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying an edge that wasn't there before. "I think there's been a mix-up with your seating assignment." Elijah, ever respectful, sat up straighter. "I don't think so, ma'am. I'm in 3A as assigned on my boarding pass." He reached for his phone to show her the digital ticket his mother had purchased weeks earlier. Sharon barely glanced at it before responding. "This seat is needed for Mr. Palmer. He has a medical condition requiring specific accommodation." Elijah, remaining composed just as his mother had taught him, pointed to his ticket again. "I understand, but my mother specifically purchased this seat for me so I'd have space to review these college materials." The atmosphere shifted as Sharon's professional veneer cracked. "As a child, you are expected to be respectful to elders. You should get up for this gentleman," she said firmly, no longer pretending this was about a booking error. Several passengers looked up from their pre-flight routines, sensing the tension building. One woman across the aisle frowned, glancing between Elijah and Sharon with visible concern. "I am being respectful, ma'am," Elijah replied, his voice steady despite the growing discomfort. "But this is the seat assigned to me. Perhaps Mr. Palmer could speak with the gate agent about a different accommodation?" That's when Sharon's expression transformed from stern to something much darker. She leaned closer, and the words that came next shocked everyone within earshot. "You people clearly lack manners and respect," she hissed. "I guess your kind wasn't taught proper values." The cabin fell silent. A businessman too rose up, paused his phone call. A woman nearby audibly gasped. Elijah sat perfectly still, his face a mask of dignified composure, even as this adult twice his age hurled thinly veiled racial insults at him in a confined public space. For those watching, the contrast was stark. A teenager demonstrating more professionalism than a uniformed airline employee. After taking a controlled breath, Elijah responded with remarkable poise. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor, please. And I'd like your employee ID number." Sharon's face flushed red. Rather than acknowledge her inappropriate behavior, she doubled down. "You're being disruptive now," she announced loudly, as if performing for an audience. "I'm going to have to call security." As she walked away, Thomas Palmer stood awkwardly in the aisle, witnessing everything but choosing to remain silent, complicit in the unfolding injustice. How would you react if you witnessed this scene playing out? Would you intervene or stay silent? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sharon returned moments later with 2 security officers, having completely reframed the situation. "This young man is refusing to comply with crew member instructions," she told them loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's being disruptive and making other passengers uncomfortable." The security officers, trained to trust crew members in potential disturbance situations, approached Elijah with stern expressions. The humiliation was about to reach another level, and though several passengers exchanged troubled glances, not one spoke up to contradict Sharon's false narrative. Sometimes the most disturbing part of these stories isn't just the actions of one prejudiced person, it's how many bystanders choose the comfort of silence over the courage to speak truth. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now, because what comes next in this story will have you questioning everything about how we respond when witnessing injustice. Security arrived with military precision, 2 men in dark uniforms flanking Sharon as she pointed out Elijah like he was some kind of threat. The theater of authority was now fully in play, designed to intimidate a 16-year-old whose only crime was sitting in the seat he paid for. "This young man," Sharon began, her voice dripping with false concern, "has been argumentative and refusing to follow crew instructions. He's causing a delay and making other passengers uncomfortable." Notice how skillfully she reframed the narrative. There was no mention of her remarks about his kind or her demand that he give up his rightful seat. In her version, Elijah was the problem, not her prejudice. Elijah opened his mouth to explain, "Sir, I have my ticket right here." "Please let me finish," the lead security officer interrupted, holding up his hand. "Flight attendants have authority on aircraft, and we need you to comply with their instructions." Once again, Elijah tried. But my mother purchased this specific seat weeks ago. I'm supposed to. Young man, the second officer cut in, continuing to argue is only making the situation worse. 3 times Elijah attempted to explain his side. 3 times he was silenced by adults who had already decided he was guilty. The pattern is painfully familiar to many who faced similar treatment. The denial of voice itself being perhaps the most fundamental form of disrespect. The security officers conferred briefly with Sharon, who pointed toward the back of the plane. We have a middle seat in row 27 available. Sir, one officer then told Elijah, you'll need to gather your belongings and move to economy class. Elijah, realizing the futility of resistance against this wall of authority, asked one simple question. May I make a phone call to my mother first? She's waiting to hear that I've boarded safely. You can call once we're at cruising altitude, Sharon replied curtly. Right now, you need to move so we can finish boarding and depart on schedule. A small request for basic dignity. Denied. As Elijah carefully packed his laptop and materials, the businessman who had watched the entire scene unfold finally spoke. Not to defend justice, but to ensure his comfort. Is there a problem with my seat now? Thomas asked Sharon. Not at all, Mr. Palmer, she assured him with a completely different tone than she'd used with Elijah. 3A is all yours. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage? Unknown to all, Thomas had slipped a $200 bill into the hands of Sharon. Thomas settled into Elijah's window seat with the satisfied sigh of someone getting exactly what they want. Though he avoided direct eye contact with Elijah, a small smirk played at the corner of his mouth as he adjusted the seat to his liking. The contrast could not have been more stark. Discomfort for the deserving, comfort for the entitled. What would you do if you saw a teenager being treated this way? Would you speak up or stay silent? Hit that subscribe button now to join a community that believes in standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Now came perhaps the most powerful moment of this ordeal, Elijah's walk of shame. With security officers hovering nearby like he was some kind of flight risk, Elijah was forced to carry his belongings through the entire first-class cabin toward economy. But something remarkable happened during that walk. This 16-year-old boy, facing public humiliation orchestrated by adults who should have protected him, transformed the moment through sheer dignity. He walked with his head held high, shoulders back, eyes forward, the very picture of composure under fire. As he passed row after row, passengers witnessed this display of character. A few looked away guiltily. Others appeared troubled, exchanging glances but saying nothing. One woman began to object, but fell silent when her husband touched her arm in warning. The collective discomfort of the cabin was palpable, but not a single voice rose in protest. When Elijah finally reached row 27, he found himself assigned to the middle seat, 27B, between 2 passengers who had already settled in. A businessman on the aisle looked annoyed at having to stand again, while the woman by the window gave an awkward smile as Elijah squeezed into the cramped middle seat. Sorry, Elijah said politely as he settled in, though he had nothing to apologize for. The woman next to him whispered, I saw what happened up front. That wasn't right. Words of acknowledgement, but offered in secrecy, too quiet for anyone else to hear. The businessman on the aisle pretended not to hear, burying himself in his newspaper. Discomfort surrounded Elijah in that middle seat, not just physical discomfort, but the psychological weight of injustice that had gone unchallenged. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Elijah closed his eyes briefly, gathering his thoughts. When he opened them again, his expression had changed. This wasn't defeat, it was determination. He reached for his phone, knowing exactly what needed to happen next. The airline thought this incident was over. Sharon thought she had won. Thomas believed he'd successfully leveraged his privilege to get what he wanted. They had no idea who they were dealing with, or, more specifically, whose son they had just humiliated. As the seatbelt sign flickered off at cruising altitude, Elijah reached for his phone. Unlike many teenagers who might have been overwhelmed by emotion, Elijah's fingers didn't tremble as he dialed. His mother had taught him that in moments of injustice, clarity becomes your greatest weapon. Dr. Michelle Johnson was in the middle of finalizing documents for a $50 million partnership with this very airline when her phone vibrated. Seeing her son's name, she smiled and excused herself from the conference room, where airline executives were eagerly awaiting her signature. "Hey, sweetheart, did you board okay?" she asked, expecting a routine check-in. What she heard instead would change the trajectory of not just this day, but the policies of an entire corporation. "Mom," Elijah began, his voice measured and precise, "something happened on the plane that I think you should know about." What followed was a masterclass in composure. Elijah recounted every detail: the initial greeting from Sharon, Thomas Palmer's complaint, the confrontation over his seat, the racially charged "you're kind" comment, his repeated attempts to explain himself, and finally his forced removal to economy class. No exaggeration, no emotional outbursts, just facts, delivered with the clarity that comes from knowing your own worth. Through the phone, we could see Dr. Johnson's expression transforming. First concern, then disbelief, then something far more potent, the controlled fury of a mother whose child has been wronged. Her silence as Elijah spoke wasn't absence. It was gathering storm clouds. When Elijah finished, the pause that followed carried weight. Then came words that every child deserves to hear when they've been treated unjustly. "Elijah, I am so proud of how you handled yourself," Dr. Johnson said, her voice steady but resonant with emotion. "The dignity you showed in that situation speaks volumes about your character." The teenager's shoulders relaxed slightly, validation from the person whose opinion mattered most. "Stay strong, stay dignified," she continued. "I'll handle the rest, and Elijah, I'll be waiting when you land." Those simple words, "I'll be waiting," carried the full force of maternal protection. 4 syllables that promised accountability was coming. What would you do if your child called with a story like this? How far would you go to right a wrong done to your family? Let us know in the comments below. After ending the call, Elijah did something remarkable. Instead of dwelling on the humiliation he'd endured, he opened his laptop and returned to his college application research. This wasn't denial. This was resilience in its purest form. The ability to focus on your goals even when obstacles arise. Meanwhile, in a conference room 300 miles away, Dr. Michelle Johnson was transforming from business partner to maternal force of nature. She stood before the airline executives who had been courting her company's business for months. "Gentlemen," she began, "I need to postpone our signing. A situation has developed involving your airline that requires my immediate attention." The confusion on their faces quickly turned to concern as she elaborated. One executive immediately reached for his phone. "Dr. Johnson, let me connect you with our customer service team." "That won't be necessary," she interrupted, already dialing. "I'm calling your CEO directly." The room fell silent. In the corporate world, hierarchy is everything. Dr. Johnson had just bypassed every level of management between herself and the top. "Richard? Michelle Johnson. We have a situation that requires your personal attention." What followed was a masterclass in executive communication, direct, factual, and with clearly stated expectations. No threats, no emotional manipulation, just the clear understanding that actions have consequences. "I'll be at the terminal when my son's flight lands. I expect you or your representative to be there as well." As the plane carrying Elijah continued its journey, 2 very different scenes unfolded. In row 27, a teenager demonstrated quiet dignity, focusing on his future despite the injustice of his present. In that cramped middle seat, Elijah was embodying every lesson his mother had taught him about perseverance. In first class, Sharon continued serving beverages, unaware that her career was now measuring its remaining lifespan in hours rather than years. Thomas Palmer reclined in Elijah's rightful seat, enjoying the extra legroom while occasionally glancing back toward economy with a flicker of what might have been conscience, quickly suppressed. But most powerful was what was happening on the ground. Dr. Michelle Johnson, one of the most respected healthcare technology executives in the country, was methodically making calls to the airline's board members, to her legal team, to the media contacts she'd developed over 15 years building her company. Every call was measured, every conversation strategic. No hysterics, no threats, just the calm assembly of accountability. This wasn't just a mother's rage, it was justice being architected in real time. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now, because what happens when this plane lands will show you exactly why you never, ever want to be on the wrong side of a mother protecting her child. The scene was now set for a reckoning. As the plane began its descent, neither Sharon nor Thomas nor any of the silent bystanders had any idea what was waiting at the gate. They were about to learn a powerful lesson about consequences, and about underestimating both a dignified teenager and his formidable mother. As Flight 2877 touched down, the usual rush to retrieve overhead items and form the inevitably chaotic deplaning line began. Passengers in first class gathered their belongings, eager to be the first off the aircraft. Sharon, having completely dismissed the earlier incident from her mind, performed her final duties with practiced efficiency. Thomas Palmer collected his briefcase, stretching his back after enjoying the spacious window seat that was never rightfully his. Meanwhile, in row 27, Elijah closed his laptop and waited patiently. No rush, no anxiety, just the calm certainty of someone who knows resolution is coming. What none of them realized was that this routine landing was about to become anything but routine. As the jetway connected and the aircraft door opened, Sharon's professional smile greeted the first passengers exiting the plane. That smile froze on her face as she looked down the jetway and saw who was waiting. Dr. Michelle Johnson stood at the gate, not alone, but flanked by Richard Wilson, the airline CEO, and two members of the airline's executive team. Dr. Johnson's presence commanded attention, her tailored suit and unwavering gaze making it clear this was a woman accustomed to boardrooms, not someone to be dismissed. The CEO's presence alone would have been unusual enough to cause whispers among the crew. Having him standing at a gate, waiting for a specific flight, was unprecedented. Sharon's face drained of color. Somehow, she knew. This was about Elijah. As first-class passengers filed past this unexpected welcoming committee, confused murmurs spread through the cabin. Thomas Palmer, emerging from the jetway, nearly stumbled when he recognized the CEO of the airline standing there with arms crossed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the gate agent announced over the PA system, "we ask that the flight crew and a passenger, Mr. Thomas Palmer, please remain at the gate after deplaning. Thank you for your cooperation." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Passengers slowed their pace, some openly staring now, others pretending not to notice while absorbing every detail. When Elijah finally emerged from the jetway, walking with that same quiet dignity he'd maintained throughout the ordeal, Dr. Johnson stepped forward. Their embrace spoke volumes. The protective circle of a mother's arms around her son, a visual statement that said, "He is mine, and you have wronged him." The power of that maternal image, of protection, of fierce love, resonated with everyone watching. This wasn't just a customer service issue anymore. This was primal. "Elijah," Dr. Johnson said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "I am so proud of how you handled yourself today." Richard Wilson, the CEO, stepped forward next. "Mr. Johnson," he addressed Elijah directly, "on behalf of this airline, I want to personally apologize for the treatment you experienced today." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Passengers who had been on the flight paused their journeys, sensing something significant unfolding. The public nature of this apology was clearly by design. Accountability performed where the humiliation had occurred. Have you ever witnessed someone powerful being held accountable in real time? That moment when privilege and position suddenly provide no protection. Share your experiences in the comments below. Sharon, now standing awkwardly at the gate with the other flight attendants, attempted damage control. "Sir," she addressed the CEO, "there's been a misunderstanding. The young man was being disruptive and refusing to follow." "We have the security footage, Miss Miller," Wilson interrupted coldly. "From the gate, from the jetway cameras, and from the cabin." Sharon's face registered shock. She hadn't considered the omnipresent eyes of security cameras capturing her every word, every expression. "And," Wilson continued, "several passengers have already provided recordings and written statements about what they witnessed." The woman who had whispered support to Elijah in economy stepped forward now. "I recorded the incident after I heard her comment about your kind," she said, holding up her phone. "I was going to report it after landing. It was completely unprovoked and inappropriate." Sharon's defense crumbled in real time. The narrative she had constructed of a disruptive teenager and a flight attendant just doing her job disintegrated under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Thomas Palmer, attempting to shuffle away unnoticed, was stopped by one of the airline executives. "Mr. Palmer, we'd like to speak with you as well." Cornered and clearly uncomfortable, Thomas finally spoke truth. "Look, I just mentioned my back was bothering me and that I preferred a window seat. I never asked for anyone to be removed." Then, after a pause, he added shamefully, "But I didn't object when it happened either." The admission of complicity hung in the air, the passive participation that allows injustice to flourish. Dr. Johnson, still with one arm protectively around Elijah, addressed the CEO directly. "Richard, as you know, our companies were set to finalize a partnership today. A $50 million contract for providing healthcare technology across your entire organization." The significance of this statement wasn't lost on anyone present. The stakes had just been dramatically raised. "That partnership," Dr. Johnson continued, her voice carrying the weight of consequence, "is now on indefinite hold, pending a complete review of your company's training procedures, diversity protocols, and accountability measures." The CEO nodded grimly. 50 million reasons to take this incident seriously had just been placed on the table. "Effective immediately," Wilson announced, turning to Sharon and the security personnel who had been summoned to the gate. "All staff involved in this incident are suspended pending investigation." Sharon began to protest, but the executive beside her simply said, "Please surrender your company ID and credentials before leaving the premises." The speed of accountability was breathtaking. From incident to consequence in less than 3 hours. If you want to see more stories of justice served and powerful lessons in accountability, hit that subscribe button right now. Our channel brings you the most compelling real-life stories where karma strikes back against discrimination and prejudice. As airport security arrived to escort Sharon and the other suspended staff members from the terminal, Thomas Palmer approached Elijah and Dr. Johnson. "I owe you an apology," he said, the entitlement now drained from his voice. "I should have spoken up when I saw how you were being treated. My silence made me part of the problem." Elijah, demonstrating wisdom beyond his years, simply nodded. "Thank you for acknowledging that." No dramatic forgiveness, no emotional absolution. Just the acknowledgement of truth. In that moment, Elijah demonstrated that accountability isn't about punishment. It's about recognition and change. But this story was far from over. The consequences set in motion that day at the gate would ripple outward, transforming not just individual careers, but corporate policy. Sometimes, justice requires more than an apology. It demands systemic change. And Dr. Michelle Johnson was just getting started. 1 week after the incident that would become known throughout the airline industry as the Johnson case, the consequences unfolded with remarkable swiftness. A national news broadcast opened with the headline, "Major Airline Terminates Staff Following Racial Profiling Incident." The anchor's serious tone matched the gravity of the story as she reported that Sharon Miller and all security personnel involved in Elijah Johnson's humiliation had been permanently terminated following an internal investigation. But this wasn't just about individual accountability. The ripple effects were transforming an entire corporate culture. The airline's CEO appeared at a press conference, flanked by diversity consultants and legal advisors. Today, he announced, we are implementing mandatory anti-bias training for every employee across our organization, from the boardroom to the baggage claim. The training program, developed in consultation with leading civil rights organizations, would be the most comprehensive in the industry. Every employee would undergo 16 hours of immersive education on unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and appropriate conflict resolution. For some companies, such announcements might be mere public relations. But the financial consequences ensured this airline's commitment was genuine. Dr. Michelle Johnson's healthcare technology company, which had been set to revolutionize patient care across the airline's employee health system, publicly announced a new partnership with the airline's chief competitor. The $50 million contract, now expanded to $65 million, represented not just a business decision, but a moral statement. Wall Street responded immediately. The original airline's stock plummeted 12% in a single trading day, wiping billions from its market value. Shareholders demanded answers, and boardroom conversations suddenly centered on diversity and inclusion with unprecedented urgency. Sometimes, meaningful change requires both moral and financial incentives. This case provided both. If you've ever wondered whether standing up for what's right can truly make a difference, hit that subscribe button now. Our channel is dedicated to sharing these powerful stories of everyday people whose dignity in the face of injustice creates lasting change. The story of Elijah Johnson reminds us that dignity isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond to that treatment. Elijah's response created a ripple effect that ultimately transformed an entire industry. His individual dignity became institutionalized respect for thousands of future passengers. What experiences have you had standing up against discrimination or witnessing someone else show extraordinary composure in the face of injustice? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might inspire others to find their voice when it matters most. Remember, treating all people with dignity, regardless of their age, appearance, or background, isn't just about being nice. It's about recognizing the fundamental humanity we all share. And as this story powerfully demonstrates, when we forget that shared humanity, karma has a way of delivering powerful reminders. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, justice may sometimes be delayed, but when it arrives, it can transform not just individual lives but entire systems. Stay dignified, stay resilient, and stay human.